Hello there, and welcome to another episode of the Red Delta Project podcast, your resource for helping you break free of the stressful dogmatic diet and exercise rat race while helping you get in the best shape of your life on your own terms. Matt Schifferly here, founder of the Red Delta Project and author of the books Both Fitness Independence and Smart Body Weight Training. Today we're talking about one of the most important things in all of fitness and how we understand how we use these things to help you get in the best shape you want, while also giving you the freedom to eat and train and live as you wish without getting stuck in any sort of dogmatic approach that doesn't work very well for you and causes a lot of stress. What we're talking about today is the massive power of influences. This is a main part of the book Fitness Independence that I write, but understanding what influences are and the relationship they give you with the results that you want gives you an immense amount of power to get what you want while also being flexible to adopt and discard whatever rules regarding diet and exercise that fit you best. Now, the first thing to understand is that influences are not causes. The results that you seek happen because of natural causes. Fitness is, after all, a natural process, and therefore Mother Nature is the one who's truly in charge of what happens to your body. Do you lose weight or build it? Do you get stronger or weaker? Do you improve your ability to function and perform, or does it atrophy? These are things that we humans technically do not control. No exercise, no diet, no supplement, no program or routine will ever directly hold 100% domain over the cause of your results. It will never happen because those things are invented by the mind of man. They're things we invented. And that doesn't mean they're not important, but they're one of the reasons why it's like, why can't we have a diet that causes weight loss for everybody? Because diets are not causes. Or why can't we have a routine that causes everyone to get jacked? Well, because a routine isn't a cause. The natural process that is 100% in control of your results isn't governed by any single one thing we do, or create, or say, or use. It's by the natural laws of Mother Nature, and the best we humans can do isn't to wrangle control of Mother Nature, but to influence our relationship with these laws. Think of like a hang glider jumping off of a cliff. The natural laws of Mother Nature, like wind, gravity, thermal updrafts, and so on, we can't control those things. We can't control gravity. Now, the egotistical human will think, yeah, I can soar like a bird. Gravity's got nothing on me. It's like, no, part of the reason why you're soaring is because of your relationship with gravity. But your device that you've invented, this hang glider, is an influence to your relationship to the wind and the air pressure and all these other things that allow you to glide. That doesn't mean gravity doesn't exist and it's still not in control. It means that you found a way to influence your relationship with those natural principles and causes. So influences are what we control. Causes and that Mother Nature has, those are set in stone, and the best we can do is change our relationship with them. Now, while causes are few, like that's the main chapters of my book, Fitness Independence, I outline like 5 or 6 different causes. Influences are practically infinite. There's millions of influences all around us every single day. And they all are pulling us and pushing us and influencing how we relate to these natural causes. But the most important thing, first lesson, is to recognize that no single influence by itself is a direct cause to the results you want, which is one of the reasons why we can search all our entire lives for a quote-unquote cause, but everything that we're going to find out there is almost always an influence. A diet, a workout routine, the equipment you use, your lifting speed, every variable that you can possibly conceive of is an influence. And as such, will not directly cause the result you want in and of themselves. Now, that's a very important thing to recognize, because while everything is influential, nothing is 100% in control. But it's easy to think that's the case. And this is what I like to call influential over-reliance. Influential over-reliance is when we find an influence and we manipulate it, we change some things about it, and it changes our relationship with the natural law that does govern the result. But because we manipulated that influence, we mistakenly believe that influence is the thing that's in charge. So let me give you a couple of examples, right? A power lifter friend of mine once thought that the only way that you can build muscle and get stronger is with deadlifts. So his recommendation all the time was, you have to deadlift. If you do not deadlift, you cannot get stronger muscles, period. I've heard some people say, if you want to lose weight, it's all about carbs. Carbs, 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 carbs. You lose carbs, you lose the weight. Carbs are 100% responsible for the amount of body fat you have. I've had people say that if you want to become better at martial arts or whatever, you have to train for at least an hour. You can't become proficient unless it's less than an hour. Now, all these things that they're recommending are influences. And that doesn't mean that they're not important. They are very important, and they can be very effective. However, an influence, by definition, has only a finite amount of pull in what you're trying to accomplish. There's no such thing as any sort of influence that is 100% responsible for your results. However, like I said, the hang glider, when we fall into an influence and we manipulate it and we get a result, it's so easy to think that's the answer, that's the solution. And this is a trap. This is a trap that we can easily fall into because we do something, we get a result, and we think, well, that's the answer, that's the solution. But this can be very detrimental in a number of ways. The first way is putting all of your eggs in a proverbial basket creates the desire to get a result through only one method or influence. And all influences have only a finite amount of pull towards your result. So no matter how well you deadlift, no matter how meticulously strict you are about a low carbohydrate diet, and no matter how hard you practice for an hour, you're only going to move that needle in the direction you want it to go in so much. Because all influences only have so much power. No matter how big they are and no matter how much you really refine it, you're only going to get so far. The second way that it can be detrimental is because when you focus a lot on one influence or a handful of influences, it's easy to ignore all of the other influences that are still in play. It's like a sports team where the coach says, I just want you to focus on defending against this one player. And the whole team just rallies around that one single player. And they're like, ha, we got you now. And the other players are like, okay, that's fine. And they just walk right up and score because they were ignored. This happens all the time. But it is very easy to happen when we find an influence. We feel like that's the answer, and we ignore the others. So beware of messages out there within our fitness culture that say these sorts of things like, this is important, the other things don't matter. That's one of the most detrimental messages that could possibly be out there, regardless of what it is. I've had people say, calories don't matter, it's all about carbs. Or food quantity doesn't matter as long as you eat the right foods. Or it doesn't matter what exercises you do as long as you use the right equipment. And all these sorts of things. This can be incredibly detrimental because while you're maximizing trying to perfect a single influence, all the other ones could be potentially undermining you. We've all heard stories about people who are like, yeah, I've been working out like crazy. It's all awesome. And my workout is as perfect as possible, but they totally neglect their diet. So they don't get the results they want. Or they're focusing on one type of food, but the others are ignored. And there's a lot of things that get thrown around like this. I was reading an article in a scientific journal about fat. And the author was saying, look, we've got the low carb and keto and everything going on these days, but the fact of the matter is we've got a lot of experts who are saying, saturated fat is bad, causes heart disease, all this sort of thing. And the author was saying, look, we overstated it and it may not be as much of a threat, but that doesn't totally leave it off the hook. But this happens with a lot of dogmatic approaches within fitness where it's black or white. It's good or bad. Where it's like, okay, see this thing over here? Yeah, we used to think it was bad, but it's perfectly fine. It has no negative influence whatsoever. So don't worry at all about it. And we can get in trouble with that. And other things where it's like, yeah, we used to think it was bad, but now or this other thing that we used to think is good, and now it's the worst thing in the world, so you have to avoid it at all costs. Real life doesn't work that way. Usually, the way it works is this thing we thought was bad, it's probably not that bad. In fact, it's probably usually good, but it still can be detrimental if the influence changes in a detrimental way. And same with good things. Like we used to think this was good or bad or whatever, but the influential pull of the influence can change in many different ways. So something that's good could be bad, and this very exact same thing that's bad could be good, depending on a number of variables. But dogmatic approaches will say, well, it's good under all circumstances for everybody, or bad for the same exact thing. But recognizing these things as not causes, but influences, gives you the power to adjust the influence. So you can make good things bad, bad things good, depending on what you need best. Like a 5,000 calorie diet. You could have all sorts of dogmatic approaches saying that's going to be bad if you're trying to lose weight, but for some people that may be beneficial if you're an athlete. And you have a large caloric expenditure because you recognize that, well, diet is an influence to my caloric balance and my weight. It's not a direct cause. It's a piece of the puzzle. So don't get stuck into this influential over-reliance, good versus bad. It's always good versus bad. Because the third thing to recognize about influences is that they can change in size and type. And that's where a lot of their power comes from. It's not the influence itself that we want to get stuck with. It's the size of it. So this happens a lot where people will look at an influence and they'll start to get results from manipulating it, and they'll try and either grow or shrink that influence like crazy. So back to carbs for weight loss. So you have someone that's like, oh, I'm trying to lose weight, and they look at their diet and they're like, oh man, I'm eating a lot of sugar and a lot of processed carbohydrates. So they start to reduce it. They start feeling better, looking better, losing weight. And they fall into that trap of thinking it's all about carbs. Nothing else matters. Fat doesn't matter. Protein doesn't matter. The quantity of food doesn't matter. As long as it's just low carb, that's the only thing I need to worry about. But here's the thing is, whereas carbs used to be a big influence in their life, they minimize it, they shrink it down, and now what they've done is they've shrunken the influence of carbohydrates, which is good if they don't need a lot of carbohydrate in their diet. But what ends up happening is now they're trying to maximize the effectiveness of a small influence. And small influences, they just don't have a whole lot of pull. It doesn't mean they don't matter. Every influence matters. But the real question is, how much does it matter? So they're in the grocery store stressing out over what peanut butter has less sugar. They're like, well, this one has 5 grams of sugar, and this one has 3 grams of sugar. But the serving size is a little bit different. And how much peanut butter do I eat? And how can I get away with? And they're stressing out over a couple of grams of sugar in peanut butter, but they're completely ignoring the fact that they sit around all day and they're very, very sedentary and they don't do very much. So their influence of physical activity is now much bigger potentially in their caloric balance than their carbohydrate intake. So they're ignoring big influences while focusing on trying to minimize small influences. It used to be big, but now it's small. And as a result, we get stuck we ignore other things that are very important. Other things is some influences change in type. Like you could have influences that change when you move, like the weather. You could live in North Carolina and the weather's hardly an influence because it's beautiful and sunny and the temperature's great all the time. And then you move up to Alaska and now you've got to deal with a lot of rain and freezing cold and stuff that doesn't allow you to get outside for your runs as much. So suddenly the weather that you're experiencing is a very big influence that you now have to contend with. But if you ignore it, then, or not aware of it, and you take that into account, then you're ignoring things that are very important into your game plan. Influences can be different for different people too. So let's say alcohol consumption. You want to look better, feel better, lose some weight and stuff. I could say, all right, simple, no more alcohol. Don't drink any more alcohol. You can't drink any more alcohol. Well, that works great if alcohol is a big influence in your life. You're like, yeah, I drink at least 3 or 4 beers every night. Like, okay, that's that alcohol consumption. That's a big influence to your diet and a big, relatively large influence to your caloric intake. So yeah, that can make sense. But you take someone like myself, who drinks maybe 1 or 2 drinks in a month, it's not a big influence. So it's not going to do very much. So a lot of times when we're thinking of, okay, this kind of diet, this approach, this type of workout, like, is it going to work for me? You want to ask yourself, is it going to be a lot of influential pull towards the root cause of the actual goal I'm looking for? Like, if I change my diet, how is that going to have some influential pull to my caloric balance? If I change my workout or my routine, how is that going to influence the cause of the stimulation of use of muscle tension and recovery, the balance of stress on the muscle and recovery? How is it influencing my use of muscle tension? How is it influencing the quality of my nutritional diet to satisfy the 4 appetites that I talk about in Fitness Independence? This gives you the power of recognizing, for you personally, like, how well is something going to work for you? I get emails all the time from people saying, will this work? What do you think of this? What do you think of this program? What if I change this up? And so on. And the answer is, damned if I know. Like, I'm not you. I don't know how much this is going to be an influence to your result. If you came to me and said, I'm thinking of giving up alcohol, I'd be like, all right, well, how much is alcohol an influence in your diet and in your lifestyle right now? That's the thing. If you're like, I hardly ever drink, I'm like, well, it's probably not going to do very much because it's a small influence. But if I said, what's a big influence to your caloric intake that's probably holding you back? You're like, dude, chocolate chip cookies, I eat them all day, every day. I'm like, okay, forget the alcohol. You know, you're probably going to want to start looking at those chocolate chip cookies as a potential influence instead. You're like, well, the experts say alcohol does X, Y, and Z. It's like, so what? Everything that we're talking about within our fitness culture, for the most part, is not about a cause. It's an influence. To open up any scientific journal, any fitness magazine, any sort of recommendations you find on the internet, almost everything talks about influences. Do this to lose weight. Do that to build muscle. Do this to feel better. All these sort of things. They're influences. They're not causes. And recognizing their influences, and they can change in size, they can change in type, that they depend on your own personal relationship with that influence, like alcohol consumption, whatever. Recognizing the influence in your own life and how it relates to the natural cause that is in charge of your result gives you the ability to say, this is important, or this isn't important, or I need to focus on this other thing instead. And now you're more in control than any sort of dogmatic approach. And the last point is the whole key is the awareness of your own influences. When I wrote Fitness Independence, I wrote about the principles and the natural causes of the major aspects of fitness, like building muscle, losing weight, and so on, not to give you answers, but to give you a compass. Because a compass is all I can do. I can't tell you how to lose weight. I can't tell you what you need to do to build muscle, because everybody's influences are different, and they're always changing. So for me to say, eat this way, train this way, do this or do that, that's nothing more than just a random guess on my part. I'm just making blatant assumptions on what you can probably use. And whether or not it's going to produce any sort of influential success, it's just random chance. But by giving you a compass and saying you need to head in this direction, I know people in the past have been frustrated with that, saying, but you're not telling me exactly what I need to eat. Like, how in the world am I supposed to know that? There's no way. But if I can say, head in a direction that improves caloric balance, like improves your dietary quality so you're taking in more nutrients, more whole foods. Improve your diet so you're not overeating but not undereating, those sorts of things. You can become more aware of your own influences in your own life. You could be like, yeah, I don't eat anything in the morning, but man, I am ravenous come 11:30, and I eat a ton of food in the cafeteria at work, and I just overeat, and then I'm slow and tired and sluggish. Well, energy level is one of the 4 appetites I mentioned in Fitness Independence. Eat in such a way that helps you sustain your energy level. So you're like, okay, I need energy level. I'm always exhausted after lunch. What are some of the influences that I can identify in my own habits that are causing that? Like, well, I get starving, and then I just load up my tray, and my eyes are bigger than my stomach. So instead of, like, let's see, if I'm ravenous, maybe I can have a little snack in the morning. Like when I get to work, I can have a piece of fruit or a little bit of trail mix or something so I'm not so hungry, and that way I don't overload my tray. See, you're creating your own solutions to manipulate the influences so you're not overeating. But how the hell would I know? Like, I can't call you up and be like, by the way, have a handful of trail mix at, like, first thing you get to work. Like, there's no way I'd know that. But becoming aware of the root causes that Mother Nature's in charge of, that are in charge of your results, and then becoming more aware of your own influences in your own life. What are the big influences? What are the small influences? How are your influences changing over time? How are the influences different between you and your coworker? You and your coworker are doing like a muscle building challenge, and they're making gains like crazy. You're struggling, and you say, okay, well, what in my life do I need to contend with? What are my genetics like? What is my sleep pattern like? How is this exercise feeling versus how is it feeling for my coworker? All these influences. Find your influences. Become aware of them and manipulate them as you see fit. Because your influences are not in charge, but they're the things you should be more in charge of. And dogmas take that away from you. Dogmas will say, this is how you need to eat, this is how you need to train, follow these rules, don't break them, even if they're not the best thing for you. That they don't address the influences you really need to address, or they put too much emphasis on the influences that really may not be very important for you, or they force you to follow rules that don't comply, they don't jive with you for your preferences and your resources and your lifestyle. Being more in control of your own influences is the key. Now, of course, recognize that you can't control all of them. There's an infinite number of influences in your life. You can't control or even be aware of all of them. And you're always going to have negative influences too. There's always going to be some things that pull you towards your goals and some things that kind of pull you away from them. And you're going to have to really dedicate a good charge of amount of your life to trying to maximize every influence in your life. That's why they have professional athletes and people who are like, this is all I do. This is my life, is trying to maximize the influences in my life so I can be the best ball player or fitness competitor I can be. I hire someone to bring in my groceries. I have someone else cook my food. I have somebody else clean my house. I have other people take care of a lot of the influences for me. And I basically build my entire life around getting this goal. And that's great when you're a professional, or if that's what you want to do. But for average Joe Schmoes like yourself and I, not going to happen. We're always going to have a mix of influences, and that's okay. That's fine. You don't have to do anything perfect, because when you get out of that influential over-reliance, what you can do is you can have what I call a multifaceted approach to your goals. Instead of focusing on one influence, you can use a collection of influences that together can add up to a much bigger effect onto your cause. And you don't have to get anything perfect. You don't have to have the perfect diet or the perfect workout program or the perfect sleep, and the perfect clothes and the perfect equipment and the perfect routine. But when you're getting better and improving the influence from a number of approaches, then collectively that can be a hell of a lot more powerful than just trying to maximize one influence to death. So check out the book, Fitness Independence, also my other book, Smart Body Weight Training, but recognizing that everything is an influence and that the causes are something to just use as a compass needle gives you immense amount of power to get much better results on your own term with a lot less stress as well. Hopefully that all gets your head spinning and thinking. Let me know comments down below if you're listening to this on YouTube. Thanks for listening. Please, as always, reviews on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, comments here on YouTube, much appreciated as well. Talk to you guys next week. Till then, be fit, live free.